All right, and we are live. So we have another episode of the Headphone Show here with this time Zach and Bevan from ZMF, of course. And so what we're gonna do with this one is I got a bunch of questions that I'm gonna ask them, but then we're gonna turn it over to the viewers here, and we're gonna get some questions from the chat as well. But I want to start off just by welcoming Zach and Bevan to the show, and thanks so much for coming on. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're good. You just got done with work, did a little Saturday work, sent the guys home happy, and now we're here.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We watch every week, so it's very exciting to be on.
It's very it's nice to hear. I was gonna ask, are you guys in your workshop right now? Like, is this sort of the workspace or office or?
We're in like a transitionary period because we're just finishing a space that we actually bought this kind of empty 3,000 square foot space about a year ago, and it's like 98% done, and so we'll be moving into that soon. And this is the current workshop, which is just the part of our house that we bought to expand the business. But the house now, I think we were talking with Tyler last week that it's headphones everywhere, and then a bedroom, which is the only place that, probably has some headphone stuff in it, but, somewhere to lay down, but then just headphone stuff everywhere else.
You just somewhere to lay down, and then that's it.
Yeah. They have little outlines of each of their bodies in ZMF headphones on their bed. But
I must sleep in the outline.
That's amazing.
Every night.
Yeah, well, so we might as well get into it here. I just want to mention Tyler's also here, of course, and it was really awesome to hear you guys, covering all the topics last week as well with on Tyler's podcast, which was a lot of fun. So if anybody's not checked that out yet, definitely give that a watch. Is it on the Dex and Tyler show, or which one was that on?
The Hobbyist, yeah.
The Hobby, yeah, okay, yeah. I'll make sure to post a link in the description afterwards. But in any case, I think we might as well kick things off with some questions that I had about, for you guys about your product development. And, I've been a pretty big fan of ZMF headphones in general. Obviously, you guys can't see it, but I daily drive the Verite, of course.
I can see you when we look over here.
Oh, okay.
See you. In fact, I see you 15 seconds ago.
Right, exactly.
But
so 15 seconds ago,
when I look over here, I'm looking at the chat, or I'm just checking Andrew out and admiring him, or Tyler. We can see anyway.
So 15 seconds ago, I was using the Verite, and I've since switched to something else. No, I'm just kidding. But no, ever since even like the O'Tour, I've been a huge fan of ZMF, and I thought I was up there with like the ZMF fanboys, and of course then I met Tyler, and that's a completely different story. But I wanted to ask you first about some of the aesthetic designs that you guys go for, and obviously they're made out of wood. Well, there's wood cups, and one of the things that you mentioned in the podcast with Tyler was there seemed to be like 3 core ideas that you guys run with, and it's wood, leather, and metal, or something like that. Like there was these 3 principles that all of your headphones seem to have. And I wanted to ask, apart from the cup design and the wood that's going on, what influences the rest of the design? So like the grills and the I guess a lot of it's just what makes sense ergonomically for like the yokes and all that stuff. But is there a component to the grill and the rest of the design that's sort of like a requirement for the sound quality that you guys are aiming for, or is this just for looks? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, so should I get this one?
Well, yeah, you can field the sonic, and I'll maybe talk about the design.
I guess there's 2 parts. There's a part where I figure out the sound, and then there's the part where I, ask Bevan if it looks okay. It's a 2-part process. But no, what usually happens is I will use my home CNC router, which is not the CNC router we use to make the production models, and I'll more or less like print out where we're starting with the design and the whole airflow aspect. And I have the prototype Verite. It might be upstairs. Maybe I'll go get it later. But more or less, I start drilling. I I CNC a few cups and make a few sets, and then I'll start drilling holes in spots and doing comparisons between a few different sets that I make. And so the airflow ends up being like, hey, where did all the airflow end up in the front element, the back element, the baffle element, around the driver, all those things I'll end up testing and then finalizing, a sound. And until that's done, I can't really, finalize a, design for the entire headphone. So that's kind of the first part of the process. And sometimes, in there, I'll figure out that something's working and we'll be able to finalize some of the aesthetic design with, my engineer and everything. But usually there's a process that's getting the sound right before I can finish the aesthetics. And the aesthetics, I mean, it's very much like what I used to do in film school, which I think angers our engineer, because what ends up happening is I'll send him something that's somewhat similar to a mood board and stuff like that, and he'll be like, no, I just want A, B, C's, and so it ends up that way. And then obviously Bevan gets involved and just says that's not working.
I think
or it is.
Zach and I both grew up in New England, and because that's an older part of the country, there's in terms of like settlement and industry, there are a lot of antiques. Like the houses are very old. A lot of people have antique things in their home, and you see how early artifacts were produced before we had plastics and mass production. And I think that sort of history of us being like, from that area, and just, there are antiques everywhere, houses are super old. I remember my dad as a kid being like, here, open this drawer, like, let me show you what a dovetail is. Or this is from from the Art Deco era, and just really learning about, design through American history, through world history, really. There's been like very sort of iconic elements that you can look at and really point to like what the inspiration was. So, Zach and I get really involved in creating these boards where we're sending each other photos of things that we find inspiring.
Bevan was lucky to grow up in the Woodbury, Connecticut area in and around it, which is, used to be, I don't know if it is now, but, one of the antiquing capitals of that area. And I know people have used the word steampunk to say our headphones. It was never my intention to create a steampunk headphone, even though I like the steampunk look. Obviously, I played BioShock a couple times, and that's the whole steampunk thing. But yes. Evan's like, what? Usually I'm going with, like the Auteur obviously has French elements to it. The Verite, has some elements that are French to the designs and the curvature of everything. And then we also incorporated a lot of Golden Mean stuff that I, had studied a lot when I was doing the film thing. So there's a lot of stuff that you kind of incorporate into the actual where you end up as the aesthetic.
Right, and what I noticed as well with both the Verite open and closed, at least with the Verite closed, is that it's quite a bit smaller than the Icon and Atticus. I could be wrong about that, but like just from the pictures that I've seen, one of the things that I initially, like when I was first getting into ZMF headphones, there was this like thought in the back of my mind when I'd see those videos of DMS wearing the Icon, where he had. It almost looked like he had 3 heads because they were about the size. And I remember thinking to myself, there's not that many photos of people wearing the Auteur, and so. But then when the Verite and the Verite Close came out, it's like these are starting to get more, a little bit more smaller and more conventional. Is that a prototype?
No, it's
the Icon.
Really old. It's a really old. It actually was telling Metal about this the other day. This is it is an Icon, a really old cherry Icon that sits by my desk. Has the old chassis on it and everything, but just giving you a little model. I think Tyler wears it so well. It's hard to compete with that.
Yeah,
But
It's the purple cups, man. It's the purple cups.
and apparently they sound better.
This is a teak
Purple
set.
makes everything better.
Sorry, metal. This is teak, not cherry. But the closed Verites actually, the cups are actually a little bit bigger in diameter, whereas the Z-axis, the thickness of it, is what is a little bit less. So that, that kind of slightly less thickness, it's about 37 millimeters versus 45. It's amazing how much that 8 millimeter difference does, turn you into a little bit more of a, little bigger outcropping.
Now,
I
is that...
also-
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say sometimes I'll say to Zach like, I don't know, I think we could make it smaller, and he's like, Bevan, audiophiles don't care. Like, it's about the sound. Why would you suggest this cosmetic?
Or they
dribble?
want it larger, right? Maybe there's... Maybe, I mean, Terran's all about the Princess Leia look, right? So... I think that's his reasoning for wanting one. But so I wanted to ask about the, like, as far as the size goes and the how that relates to like the sonic qualities as well, like especially for closebacks, is this one of the ways that allows for a certain kind of soundstage to come through, where if it was like a smaller kind of headphone it would be more challenging? Or what's your take on that stuff?
On how much back cup volume there is?
Yeah, like how, so like say you have a larger space to work with, does that make things easier for tuning purposes for starters, but then also to try and get the kind of other aspects that you're looking for in the sound?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you're defining the cup volume and how far the driver has to be from the ear versus how far it is from the back cavity. I mean, closed headphones are just so hard to design in that aspect, because as you move millimeter by millimeter away from the ear and then millimeter by millimeter closer to the back of the end cavity, you get lots of changes. You increase the cup reverb, you increase the immediacy and the impulse response depending on how close the driver's to the ear. So there's definitely a really, pretty defined sweet spot. And, we altered that just a little bit, with the Verite closed versus what we had with the Atticus and Icon. And actually the Verite closed, when I first started, I was trying to get it to be even sleeker, and I had the cups closer to the wall. Actually, do I have a prototype over there? I think I have. Do I? I don't know. I'll grab it in a minute while Bevan's talking if we have it, but it was much closer to the ears, and I just, with that less cup depth and volume behind the driver, I ended up having to add more to get the amount of decay and the frequency response I wanted, because, the closer that cup is, the more internal reflections are, and you have to control them differently. And for the new damping methods I wanted to do, I found that once I got beyond 34, 35 millimeters in cup depth, coupled with our baffle depth and how deep the driver was away from the ear, that ended up being a sweet spot where we had to be over that for it to work. And whereas the Atticus Icon drivers are angled, so they're not totally 45 millimeters the whole way. So we have found a range in there that seems to work quite well. And even with the prototype I'm working on now that I was talking to you about, the headphone that we're aiming for, that, closed headphone, we're aiming for that $600 to $900 range. I'm finding a similar thing, that there is a sweet spot, in there that sounds the best, where you have to kind of meld that with portability so that, people don't feel too embarrassed when they're in public.
But see, I would almost think now, like for me, my tastes are such, are I think initially I would have been maybe a bit apprehensive about the larger cup size, but now, like when I look over at, the headphones that are on the wall here, or behind me, and when I look at, my eye always stops at the Verite. And so I think there's something to that as well, where it's, if you're thinking of it as like a centerpiece for like a hobbyist room, or in somewhere where you're going to be listening to music, having it be the size that it is, it kind of helps it stand out a little bit as well. But it's I always just find it interesting, like the pros and cons of that kind of stuff. But actually, on the subject of damping, that was actually one of my next questions, which I might as well skip to. But so there was, I think, some time ago, I think Tile took apart an Icon. I correct me if I'm wrong on that, but
Yeah, when he reviewed the Atticus and Icon.
Yeah. And I was wondering, is there similar? So like, I'm always interested in the solutions that people have for that manufacturers have for closed back headphones in particular. And if you look at, so there's that kind of damping method there, but then there's other methods. There's people doing stuff like, for example, Focal with their Stellia and the Legion. They have kind of like it looks like the inside of a room, like a treated room, with the kind of like the pyramid-y box things that are going on the inside. Is that something that you'd ever consider messing around with? So that was my first question. But then the second question is, do you have to do any of this kind of damping for the open back versions as well, or does the advantage of it being open back mean that you don't need to do this as much?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll answer one by one. We actually did print some damping for the that. I don't think it was exactly what Focal has, kind of like a stepped look to a little pyramids or something, right?
Yeah.
So I experimented with those plastic pieces, and I guess one of the advantages or disadvantages we have in building them is that because they're made of wood and they're built by hand, we can do some things that I think a bigger company that just needs to, slap them together and put glue the same piece in it every time, that we can do a little bit different things.
You can like finesse
because we're making them so much slower, But what ended up happening was I tried some of those similar stepped like pieces of plastic, pieces of different 3D printable materials, both on my, I have a Formlabs 2 printer and a bunch of, direct print 3D printers. And, I couldn't find a plastic material that I felt made them sound more natural. I mean, I guess you guys probably know I'm very sensitive I want things to sound organic, yeah. And so I didn't like any of that. And the similarity to the Atticus Icon, I like using cork a lot because it is a wood and it's, melted material, and it will take away any harshness from the wood and reflections and stuff. And aside from that, the acoustic design is pretty different in the closed Verite. It's almost what I call kind of a double cavity design, and not like what Sennheiser's doing or anything, but it kind of makes a chamber around the edges of the cups the way the damping is oriented. And we tried to find easier materials to use it with, but we ended up using a really specific polyester material that can only be hand rolled by our technicians every single time, and it has to be rolled into a piece and then set in a very specific way around the ports and everything. And that's one thing I would tell people: don't open your Verite closed to go look at this, because if stuff moves around, it may, it's not like it's going to be a, magic box where a, Joker guy pops out and says your headphone's never going to sound good again. But it is oriented in there in a specific fashion around the driver chamber, and it's that kind of double cavity of where the damping material's around in a circle that allows the sound waves to disperse in a slower manner. And it was really like a eureka moment when I figured out this damping, because it's what allows there to be just enough open space back there for it to sound more open than most closed headphones, but having enough damping and decay so that it still, doesn't have all those nasty reflections that, closed headphones can be famous for.
And I'll just say, I remember the photo that Tile showed that you're referencing, and I think that was really early in our building stages. And now that we have, a staff that, Zach works with really closely, training everyone in the methods that he's developed, we've come to get everything die cut and very uniform, and the guts of our headphones look much different these days from maybe some older displays of when
we can talk about Tile because he's not around anymore.
No.
He's probably watching. He's probably watching. He's tuning in somewhere in Montana.
Drive that van near lines and we'll
hashtag van life.
Yeah.
I got a tour of he's a very nice van that he.
Oh really?
I hope he's doing well.
He has a cute dog. He showed up at a Can Jam once after he had retired with his dog, and I was like, "Who is this person with a dog around expensive audio gear?"
He's
it's style.
yeah, yeah.
He's
got
that.
exactly, yeah. That's awesome. So I wanted to ask then, with I mean, you're talking about like the reflections and damping and all that kind of stuff. Is there? So I was going to ask, does the wood help with this kind of damping as well? Or I know you've talked in the past about different densities and things like that having different effects. But as far as making a closed back headphone goes, do you think this is that the fact that you're using wood materials and allows that, it has these certain, whichever characteristics that it has, is that a parameter that then helps with something like damping, or is it more influencing other aspects like, the speed and decay and things like that?
Well, first off, before we go into that, I'll show you what early prototype, which is not.
I love
made
the
of
color.
Wood. Yeah, this is the Formlabs Tough resin. It's tough.
Okay.
Never gonna break, and it is very heavy actually because it's a very dense material. But and you can see these cups are actually about 5 millimeters thinner, and these did not work out. These do not sound very good, but I was too busy to take them apart. So
Right.
here they are. But when I do some prototypes out of cups like this, and what I find is that it's not that you can't, you can get a great sounding headphone, as anyone knows, out of any, material, plastic, metal, wood, obviously. And, I know Grotto's now doing the hemp material. There's tons of materials you can make a good sounding headphone out of. So you don't have to use any specific material to make a headphone sound good. But, the main thing with ZMF and using wood is just that, as we've talked about in the past, and I'm sure some of the users knows that, having a headphone that's out of a material that will change the sound some, but not change it beyond the usability of, if you're going to like the sound or not. It just makes every headphone more unique. And,
Right.
But I wouldn't say that the wood, helps it or hurts it in any way. It just makes our product more unique, and it gives you, the user a little bit of adjustability in there to say, because if someone comes to me and says, hey, I really like the HD800, or I really like the immediate decay of like this LCD2 I used to have, or something like that, that can more set me along the lines of like, oh, like if they want immediate decay in a black background, they'll probably like a harder wood because the wood's not going to resonate as much. Or if they like that diffuse field type sound, a lighter wood like a Monkey Pod, where they can hear, a touch of that echoey, cup reverb, because some people love that, some don't like it, and it's always interesting to see them try two different woods and figure out if which one works for them. But
So what you're saying, to just go off Andrew's question, is that the wood, because there's a variety of different densities, the density does contribute to the damping. Either it's like being in a room that's super treated, like very hard, or a little like softer, and there's
and actually I was having this
kind of
discussion with I probably can't say his name on it, but with one of our owners. And when I'm designing the sound for a headphone, I will always use a lighter wood that's going to end up as a stock wood versus using a harder wood that'll end up as a limited edition. And the reason for that is that I always want to get the decay at a point where, as I'm choosing the wood, you can always take away decay, and people will always be fine as decay goes away and cup reverb goes away. So I always want to set the stock wood as almost the point where, like, hey, this is the most amount of decay I'm, as the headphone designer, am willing to have in this headphone, the most amount of cup reverb. I'm not going to go to a softer wood than this. And that makes choosing woods after that easier, because I just know, hey, any wood I choose after this has to be denser to, keep the sound that I was after in this, if that makes sense.
Right. So just so I'm thinking about this correctly, then the denser the wood, I know you have this on your website, but I just want to confirm, the denser the wood, the more cup reverb effect you get. Is that correct?
The denser the wood, the less cup
The
reverb.
less. Okay.
'Cause think about it as in terms of like, if you have a really hard piece of rubber versus a hollow piece of rubber or something, the one that's hollow or lighter is gonna vibrate more as you
Right.
hit it.
Right. Okay. That makes a certain amount of sense. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to ask about the product goals that you guys have for the different models that you have. So, for example, when the Auteur came out, that had this sort of more kind of like, let's say, warm take on neutral kind of tuning, and it was very, very popular. But then when you guys released the Verite, it had a very different kind of sound to it. I'm just wondering, like, is there, when you're tuning a headphone or when you're coming up with the design, do you already have it in the back of your mind that you're going to have, okay, this is going to sound like this one, and this is going to sound like this, or this is going to have this kind of flavor to it? Or is this something that you come to as you're developing it and you just realize you like this thing, or you like a different kind of sound, or you're after something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I'm designing headphones, you could kind of think as our headphone lineup is almost like this is Zach's collection of headphones that he made for himself.
Yeah.
Versus like, hey, what's the market need or what? Because I don't know. I think there's some brands that have headphones where it's kind of like the whole brand has a similar sound throughout. And I know we have that too, but it's just like, the $300 version of it, the $600 version of
Yeah.
it, the $2,000 version of it. Whereas, our prices are more based on like, hey, how much did this cost for us to do the R&D? How much does it cost us to make the product? Like the Verite has that acid etched grill and magnesium parts and the beryllium drivers that cost so much money for us to get the material to make the drivers.
Right.
And so it's more that like, oh, I made what my, neutral headphone is in the Auteur, which is that warm neutral you were talking about. I've got a really punchy nodal driver in the Alis, but I don't have this really fast headphone in my collection yet. So I'm going to go make that driver and do what I need to do with those materials to get this fast, dynamic, quick, fast decay, type headphone that has a little bit of a nuanced response that kind of accentuates imaging and stuff. And so, it's more, me being like, hey, let's keep the collection growing.
Right. I love that idea of
Doesn't always
Zach's
say,
collection.
no more collecting.
Well, but I mean, on that subject, I mean, is there a Bevins headphone collection coming soon? Is that something that's also,
Said with the
Called
new,
iPhone speakers.
the new one should be
the
called
iPhone speakers, right?
Actually, you should create a little ZMF iPhone cup thing that you could put the iPhone in to get so it projects. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh.
Like, do you see those?
Tyler.
That's
Tyler?
I've made one of those for my car, like a makeshift
When?
one, because I couldn't hook it
No,
into
I
the
get it.
speakers.
The
Oh.
ZMF iPhone horn adapter.
Oh man, I became I did a bad thing revealing that about myself.
Nah.
I discredited all audiophile clout from here on out. No, I actually like the Verite closed. I was an Icon fan before. That's what I would most reach for.
You've always liked the closed headphones.
I've always liked
more.
closed headphones more. So I was kind of shocked to hear that the headphone world, most people tend to appreciate open. They're like, well, if you have to use closed, I'm like, what? I prefer closed headphones. That was interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I get very distracted by like outside sounds. If I can hear anything around me, I will be like, distracted.
It's kind of like the ultimate headphone experience when puts you in your own world. Is that what you like about it?
Yeah,
You're just
yeah.
away.
Yeah, but not so much so like noise canceling kind of freaks me out because I like to be able to hear like, if the house is burning down. It's all about,
I'm always trying to get you to
being
wear
chill in
my
headphones.
Sony 1000Xs. I'm always trying to get Bevan to wear my Sonys and be like, hey, this will help you multitask and this and that. But the noise canceling just freaks. Is it just too quiet? Is that?
Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, closed headphone fan. I'm a very closed person now.
Verite closed. Okay. All right. So is that the beginning of Bevan's collection? Is the Verite closed, and then?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always, there's headphones that go out the door and you're always sad. You're like, oh, I wish I could keep that one. That one's nice. And, Bevan has said, I think there's we did a one-off olive wood A-list that is on the table upstairs. And Bevan's like, do we have to send this one out? Are we sending this one out? I'm like, nobody, that's yours for now. That'll be yours
Oh.
until. because we have a stash of olive wood we bought. We made one, came out well. So in the future, at some point there will be a olive wood headphone run.
Right. Well,
It does
that's
not
exciting.
smell like olives.
If you could have any color, Bevan, on that outside of the olive wood, what would it be though?
On the Verite closed.
Yeah, I mean, I know we showed them on the cast we went live with you on, Tyler, but the stabilized wood is really super neat.
I'm excited for those.
They're-
Someone's asking if you've tried IEMs.
Have I have. I'm gonna come off as like a super picky person, but I also don't like the feeling of things like in my ears.
I'm with you.
So I just really like over-ear closed headphones.
It's a lot of your phone being on speakerphone.
That's exactly, yeah. I think I have like a very picky sensory system, and I just, that's what I found like doesn't bug me out too much.
Metal says,
Thankfully, you're among
Bevan-
audiophiles.
Metal says Bevan's husband's headphones. That's
right,
that's
Metal.
more or less the vibe.
And,
Yeah.
and Elnric,
Yeah,
there's
that's
Elnric. Elnric said hi earlier too, guys, and he just posted
Elric
too.
on there. Say
Yeah.
hi
Hi,
again, Elric.
Eric. I know I saw Christopher and
Yeah.
Android.
I was
Just-
Jake's
just
all here.
Crin's in here too, I think.
Crin's
He,
in here too,
yeah,
yeah.
he's
He's
more the
the-
IAM guy. We were just having this conversation though about closed back versus IAMs, and like I tend to like my preferences align with Bevan's a little bit on the closed back front, which it's not because for me though it's not because of like disliking the feeling of IAMs. I find that there's more to be gained by over ear headphones in general. To me it just sounds more I guess more normal. Whereas with IEMs I always feel like. Yeah, especially this is something I've noticed even with IEMs, and maybe I'm alone in this, but like I feel like when I'm outside like walking around with IEMs, I can feel or I can hear the vibrations of my footsteps. Like this is sort of low frequency thing going on, and it really gets to me. It's really weird.
I totally understand what you're talking about. Where you feel like trapped in your own body and you can hear your like swallowing
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're like, stop. Yeah. I don't
You
know,
ever
maybe
try
it's just-
you ever try eating a sandwich with those IEMs in?
Oh man,
But-
I think some people are into that. It's like an ASMR trigger for them.
Yeah, maybe.
have to try it after this stream.
Oh god.
I just saw Chip. Hi, Chip.
Well, the other thing about IEMs too is that I'm jealous of as a manufacturer is like Campfire just came out with like 3 flagship IEMs the same day. Like I could I don't know,
Right.
maybe it's me, I could just never design 3 flagship headphones. I feel like us as a company, we would be able people would come out with 3 at a time. People's mind would blow. I wouldn't know which one to buy.
Right.
The IEM world
All
is
of
so
them. All of them.
saturated; they can do whatever
Yes.
they want.
That's true. I agree with you, Zach. I think it's oversaturated.
Yeah. Okay. I have a bunch more questions here for you if you guys don't mind.
Keep it rolling.
So I had a question about your target tuning, and we've chatted about this in the past. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about your target tuning is, so apart from that sort of slight downslope and kind of the let's say slightly warmer kind of sound, we talked about how a lot of your headphones have a kind of euphony to them, and like so when you say euphony, I know what you mean. But I'm just trying to think of like how can I like in what other ways can I describe this quality? And it is kind of like a romantic kind of sound. It's something like that. And
Magic.
yeah, exactly. But I'm wondering like
David
is
Blaine
this something
style.
that you're when you're tuning a headphone? Are you like consciously trying to get it to have this kind of quality, or is this just something that you end up getting as a result of your own preferences?
See,
Like,
real quick,
yeah.
before you say
Yeah, go
something, when that question, Andrew, for whatever reason, this is more just a funny aside, so you can answer in a second. But I just imagine Zach doing some Fantasia with Mickey with the hat, and he puts then he gets the wizard thing, he gets the big robe, he starts going in there, starting to design his
Waves the
sound
wand
profile.
and says, "You
The
must
wand-
have
yeah.
euphony."
Yeah. and he gets the brooms to go in
Yeah.
and start converting into all the headphones.
Yeah.
I think that comes from it's not a conscious decision where I sit down and say, I'm going to tune this headphone until I have euphony, as Tyler would. It's that I think it comes from a place where my background is in, when I was in my early 20s, I used to play tons of acoustic instruments and try to play music with people and go to, bluegrass shows and stuff like that. And so a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm listening to a lot of acoustic music. I also like electronic music, EDM, and stuff like that. And it's, that paired with the kind of gear that I have and the, solid state and tube amps and all that stuff, there just ends up being a point where I'll be listening to, my preferred things. And, now at this point, that I've been doing it for so long, I know exactly where, on the frequency response graph that I'm kind of looking for to get to my, specific taste. And so what ends up happening is, I'll hit that on the graph, I'll go listen to it, and I'll go back and forth, as I'm tuning a headphone. And it always ends up to where that sweet spot to where, those acoustic instruments sound as it is close to in the headphone as they can, to where I am in person listening to them, or playing them, the way they kind of reverberate. And I think that's why there's, a little bit of, cup reverb in our headphones that, is added in by having a little more wood around, the closed and the open enclosures, and a little bit more of that, decay that to me sounds more lifelike versus a headphone that has zero decay and just disappears. And every once in a while there'll be a customer who loves our headphone with a super low impedance amp like a Rupert Nev or THX or something like that. And those are great amps. They're fantastic. They give you a really clean output, but they take away, because of the high damping factor, especially with our headphones being high impedance, they take away some of that stuff that I, tune into the headphones, which is that little bit of, what we're calling euphony, but is that kind of, slightly rounder sound that is more of life, to me at least.
Is more of life. I love that description.
More of life.
It's funny because I had a similar question that I asked of Fang Bian from Hi-Fi Man. I asked him, like, do you tune to a certain target curve? Do you have this very carefully figured out? And his answer was actually kind of similar. Like he said that he likes to, his version of real is going to a really good seat in Lincoln Center or like Carnegie Hall or something like that, and then hearing the concert, and that's what he aims for. And it's really interesting to hear that as being a target, like that kind of, like, not necessarily looking at okay, I want to match this frequency response curve or Harman target or whatever, but rather here's how I want to hear this music that I like. But that brings me to the next question that I had, which I also asked of Fang Bian, which is, do you have certain genres in mind when you're tuning a headphone or trying to get it to a certain, like, for example, is there a headphone that you're like, yeah, I really want this to sound really good with EDM, and then that's how you evaluate it?
Yeah, I get that question a lot in emails, and I know you see it a lot too when you're doing emails, that it's like people are like, which one of your headphones is good for Frank Zappa? And I'm like, I've never thought about this before. And the truth is that when I'm tuning a headphone, I'm tuning for the overall sound, and I'm not saying, hey, I'm going to go listen to the new Goat Rodeo Session CD and make sure that this headphone's the best for that. Because it, like anybody, I listen to a lot of different things, and I want to make sure that the headphone works for all that, but it's going to work for that with its own character.
Right.
And so it's more useful to me when I hear people ask those questions to say, hey, what are your subjective tastes towards, instead towards, like, in describing how they want to hear something, than just saying what genre. Even though I know the Atticus, because it's got all that mid bass and relaxed sound that lets you turn the metal up really loud and have a good time.
Metal's favorite headphone, actually.
I don't know if he listens to death metal, but
I think that's a safe. I think we can assume.
We can assume that. Yeah.
So many genres of metal we learned about. What was the one?
He listens
what's
to
that metal that goes on for like an hour?
Oh,
Doom metal.
Doom metal.
Learned about doom metal. There's a lot of different types of metal.
So many subgenres to metal that associated with like subcultures that I just had no idea. It's very interesting.
I saw a video on YouTube of animals playing metal the other day.
There's
Dogs, I think.
someone sent me a link of, it was like AI generated death metal that was just going on for hours, and it actually sounded very much like an actual band playing, but it was all like a neural network. I forget who sent me that. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. So
Yeah, we'll take a break to watch
He
the
listens to
video.
emo metal.
listens to emo metal. See, I just thought he always listened to Metallica. This should be its own, thing. Is what kind of, can we guess correctly what kind of metal 571 likes? But so no, on the subject of genres, it's funny because like that's exactly what Fang Bian said as well, and his reasoning made a lot of sense to me, which was that you within genres you have a very wide range of recording styles. And so you may have jazz. So I always think of, like jazz music as being a little bit more like warm. You got those upright double basses and, vocals and things like that. In comparison to, classical music maybe being a little bit different, or rock music being a little bit different. But I think he was right when he said that, within all these genres, you can record it in ways that are brighter or warmer, and where the mastering is different as well. And so it doesn't, like having one headphone for just one genre, or tuning a headphone just for one genre might not be, as straightforward as we think. So that it's good to hear that as well, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that'd be impossible to.
Yeah.
'Cause just like as I move closer to the mic or I move further away from the mic.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's all recorded in different ways, and
I also think, I mean, to me, it just sort of follows that if you're trying to have a headphone reproduce live music from a real experience, that you should have a lot of experience listening to live music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how are you going to judge if this reproduced guitar strum sounds like an actual guitar strum unless, you've had a lot of exposure to that? I don't know. To me, that just sort of follows.
Experience.
But at the same time, I'm sure there's people out there that want to don't listen to live music and only listen to recorded stuff, and because there's some bands you hear the recording and then you see them live and they sound totally different.
Very
See,
true.
what I would wonder is like if somebody's never heard the sound of an acoustic guitar, which is ridiculous, but imagine somebody's never heard the sound of an acoustic guitar, and they've only ever heard recordings of acoustic guitars on headphones that are not particularly, like, let's say, well tuned. Say they're super weird tuning somehow, and then they think, oh, that's just what acoustic guitars are supposed to sound like. Right?
That's what's your reality, right? Because it's your
Yeah,
experience,
yeah.
it's your reality.
Yeah, exactly.
I always try to get Zach to go to concerts by saying, "Hey, it's R&D. We should go."
You say it's R&D.
Well played.
I'm like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah, but we're not putting concerts as R&D expenses.
No,
just so our
no.
accountant knows.
Zach's like, I'm tired. I don't want to go.
Not that I've been to a concert in the last 6 months or whatever.
Right.
No, we had some good ones that were canceled.
Oh yeah, that's tough.
What was that? Yeah, Asgare.
Asgare
Was just about to happen, and then the pandemic hit. So Asgare, hope you're watching this.
I don't
missed
think
it.
they are. We gotta link them. Yeah. Okay, so the last question on that subject of headphone tunings was when you're tuning headphones, you mentioned like solid state and tube amps and how and all that stuff, and I was wondering, for when you're coming up with a final tuning, do you have a priority? Do you think, okay, I really want this to sound really good on the ZMF Pendant, for example, or something like a tube amp that would be like that? Or are you thinking this has to sound good on both solid state, has to sound good on tubes, has to sound good on everything? So what's your take on like tuning with certain synergies in mind?
Uh-oh, my compressor just went on. Can you hear that?
Yeah, but it's okay. We can still hear you.
We're in the
Do
workshop.
you know how to turn it off? It's the one. It's the
So,
one right.
so like, and on that subject, do you tune headphones with the sound of a compressor in the background? Is that like part of the, no, just kidding.
I well, it either turned itself off or Bevan turned it off. Did you get turned off, or was that just?
Come on.
Well, sometimes it turns itself. All right. So, anyways, tube amps versus solid state amps. When I'm tuning, I'm usually on a solid state amp, honestly, because
Interesting.
it's kind of the similar thing where if it's gonna tube amps add a little bit of that second order distortion.
Yeah.
They add things, right? And so where solid state amps, pretty much are gonna give you, what's in the headphone. Although the impedance, ups the damping factor pretty high, and also more people out there are listening on solid state amps than tube amps. And so I think it'd be a little bit tougher to tune on a tube amp that maybe because of the damping factor is lower, is adding a little more romance or a little more of that euphony, and I'd be hearing something that'd be more different than what everyone else is going to hear.
Right.
And so, right now, I mostly tune on a solid state amp, and that's not to say that I don't have a tube amp right there and go listen to it, but my first listen is usually going to be on a solid state amp. And that's just because I don't want to add in any of those extra things that come from a tube amp, even though I absolutely love them as something that is going to be the first result of where I'm at. Because I haven't done it yet, but I could imagine if I tuned on a tube amp and then went to a solid state amp, I'd probably like what I did on the tube amp more than the solid state amp. Whereas I think the reverse, the solid state sound is always going to qualify to the tube amp more because there's less added there as a default.
Right. That was one of the things I really liked about the Pendant, was that it was, one of the more neutral tube amps that I think I've ever heard. And it still had that tube character in spite of the fact that I think even I measured it on one of those on the little mini DSP ears rig. I was measuring how headphones would sound, or would the frequency response, and whether or not they were any different, and they weren't, which I thought was kind of surprising because you could really still hear the tube character coming through, and that was that's what I really liked about it. But I think we could move on to some
tube amp shouldn't change the frequency response.
I think we can move on to some of the more technical questions. So Bevan, I hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
Throw me a softball, Andrew.
No. So I know you guys. My question was going to be, what's polyethylene naphthalate? But before getting to that one, maybe I wanted to ask, what are some of the challenges that you noticed when trying to tune a headphone with this beryllium or vapor deposited beryllium driver in the Verite, and is there anything from a materials perspective that when you do go to this kind of driver, well, first I would say, what do you like about beryllium, but then second, what would be the challenges with working with that material that makes it difficult to tune, or is it even difficult to tune?
Yeah. I mean, the reason I wanted to go towards beryllium is that we've tried a bunch of other materials, for the membranes and stuff, and the metal drivers are always tough because we've tried aluminum, magnesium, we've tried titanium, and there's always, they ring. I mean, there's a ringing to metal that is going to be there to some extent, and out of all the metal drivers that I've used, the one that rings the less and has that fastest decay, and I think I've seen on the Materion studies and everything and read their white papers and stuff that when you do all the scientific measurements, that beryllium out of all those, and you can hear it pretty immediately, it just has the most natural sound because it's not leaving anything extra on the table. And I'm sure you can see that impulse response and all that stuff and decays things. And so, it's similar in that, you're not getting as much added. And then, as far as going with a vapor deposed driver versus the pure beryllium, it actually, the cost wasn't too different the cost of the per driver is a little less, but the amount of material we had to buy to make the deposed drivers and depose the beryllium onto the polyethylene was so much higher that it kind of canceled itself out. And I've always just liked the polyethylene naphthalate material because it, it provides a little bit more of a nodal response because it is, a thin plastic material. And so, having those two combined enabled us to get that really fast sound, that was still just nodal enough so it didn't, because one of the complaints I think that I've heard every once in a while about the Autour, which is a pretty stiff membrane, is that it moves as a panel so much. And so it ends up sounding, if people have put it on at shows that don't know anything about our brand, they'll put it on, they'll be like, this is a planar magnetic, right? And like, oh, no, it's not. And that's because it has that kind of slight compression to the sound, even though it's very neutral, because the driver's so stiff. And so adding that polyethylene naphthalate in the Verite enables just to get a little bit more nodal of a response so that it would end up having that kind of speed to it without sounding harsh, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't realize that, because the Autour uses the biocellulose, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I would never have thought had that thought about the Autour with the as a planar. But I guess so. When you say nodal, do you mean like you're looking for a little bit more give there, or what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. I guess it's just the idea that when the driver's excursion,
Yeah.
that the center node of the driver, like if you look at a driver when the music's playing and you're just watching it, looking at the membrane, you can kind of see, especially when you turn the volume up really loud. Of course, I always try to break a couple drivers when we're in the R&D process.
Right.
You can kind of see what part of the driver is moving a lot, and how much the voice coil's moving it, and how much the attachment ring is moving and everything. And it's just having the slightly thinner polyethylene behind there allows it to move a little more in the center of the driver, the node, versus it
Right.
just moving with the surround as a panel. And so the Autour driver has the thick surround and moves more as a panel, whereas the Verite one has a little bit more, even though it's still pretty stiff, a little bit more movement just from the center.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. And on the subject of aluminum magnesium, is this you're talking about? You mentioned it on Tyler's podcast as well, but the new one that's in development, is it going to still be aluminum magnesium, or have you settled on any
I'm
materials to
actually
use?
not sure. I haven't decided on a final material for the driver yet, and part of the reason is that we're, at first I was going to use our old design that, but it's more and more looking like, and it's probably just me being restless, that I kind of want to have something new and redo the molds a little bit to see what I can get out of some new driver designs and materials and stuff. So I'm not 100% sure, and we're a little ways away from releasing that headphone. Right now I'm still playing around with different membrane materials.
Right. Okay, so it's more just it's still a gleam in your eye.
It's, yeah, the tough thing about it is I have the physical design pretty much done. What I know is working really well, but it's kind of finalizing those elements at the end.
Right.
Zach has the weirdest sleep schedule. Like, he doesn't need lots of sleep as a person. And so at the end of his day, he usually works on like ZMF production stuff until like 10. And then from maybe 11 until like 2 in the morning, you just hear 3D printers going, and Zach, I just hear his feet going from room to room. And then in the morning, he's like, oh, look, like, come, let me show you this. So, yeah, I don't think anything is final until it's final, because there's a lot of, he's up iterating.
I always feel like I need more sleep.
But sometimes,
Someday.
Never enough time in the day.
yeah. I was just going to say,
Someone's
sometimes it's
gotta
like,
make the prototypes.
for people who are creative especially, I think it's, when that moment strikes and you got that idea and you just got to see it through. It can happen at any hour.
When he first started modding... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when he first started modding T50s, I used to know like the exact sound of like an entire chassis just like hitting a wastebasket in the other room. Like I'd just be like, oh no, he's gonna be mad. Like I knew that as a sound when you were.
I broke a lot of T50s 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. It was not fun.
I mean, that's one of the things that, yeah, right. Like, and something. I mean, I think for everybody who's sort of heard the ZMF story, which I don't want to speak for you guys, but it's something that resonates with me, and I think a lot of other enthusiasts as well, where you were the hobbyist. I think a lot of us can sort of see ourselves in your shoes back when you first started, where you had this idea of changing something on a headphone to improve the sound, and it's amazing to see where that's kind of taken you guys to now, where you guys at CanJam, you have the whole room is a ZMF room, and it's like it's crazy to see what's become of this, right? And even just when I was listening to what you guys were chatting with Tyler about the other day, you mentioned that you're like one of your first like high-end headphones was like the HE500, and like pretty much everything you were mentioning, I was like, that's exactly how I got started in this hobby. That's exactly my experience as well. So I to see, or to I guess know that you guys have done this from the early days, in around the same time that I was interested in this stuff as well, like back on HeadFi, is very refreshing, and it's inspiring in many ways.
Many ways I'm still on that journey of finding out your tastes are always changing and everything, but when somebody's talking to us about what headphone they're looking at of ours or other headphones in the industry, it's you kind of, I don't know, for me it's really nice to talk to people about that hobby part of it, because I'm either in the same place they are now or where they are talking about a few years ago, so I can really empathize and really put myself in their shoes and be excited about that part of the hobby and excitement of finding out what works for you and all that.
Right. Actually, I got to mention as well that the purchasing process for when you buy a ZMF headphone involves, for anybody who's unaware of this, is one of the most exciting processes, especially for anybody who, like, I'm just thinking of how many times I've refreshed that spreadsheet.
It's like a mini Christmas.
Exactly.
Anticipation,
it's just
of like, oh, did it move up? Did it move up? Am I
where am I on the list?
I've got to update. We've been doing a really bad job of updating that. I will update it. I'll do it right now. No,
that's part of the fun. That's part of the fun.
It is part of the fun. It absolutely is. I mean, every week you're back looking at the spreadsheet and seeing where you're at. It's just it's a totally.
The anticipation.
I remember we had one customer who was like, my headphone is in pending and I just got a shipped notification from you. Sorry about that. Hope you're home.
We sent you a
seahorse case.
Yeah, so sometimes we're not always staying on that with just trying to, attend to the other areas of things, but yeah.
Right.
We'll be better.
No, I like it as is. It's great. Keep everybody guessing. So getting back to the technical discussion here a bit. I had a question for you specifically about. I had questions for you guys about the pads and pad development, but one of the things that I've really liked about the Verite in particular is that there are so many different pad options that do. I mean, there's a general sort of trend for the sound, but you can influence the sound to be brighter or warmer or whatever with so many different pad options. And I first wanted to ask, so specifically about the Verite, one of the things that makes it very unique, I find, is the sharp, like let's say, dip there at 3 to 4K hertz roughly. I'm not sure if that's exactly where it shows up on the Audio Precision rig, but one of the things that's yeah, exactly. One of the things that stands out to me with that is that I almost think that it doesn't look the way that it sounds, because it sounds like it's so specific, like it's a very particular resonance that's being removed. And I'm like, I was wondering, like, have you guys had a similar kind of experience with the Verite as well? And this is for Tyler as well. I've tried to put it into words in other live streams that I've done, which is difficult.
Which ear pads that we
Oh no, sorry. The getting to the
Or-
earpads was
Okay.
in spite of the fact that you can get different, you can use different earpads that can have different effects on the sound. There's still something recognizable about the Verite, and in my mind, it is that one little small element that's this resonance that's removed. And I remember when I was trying to like play around with EQ and I was trying to add a little bit of energy back there, I always find that it's as if you're adding a resonance that you didn't know you didn't want.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the I mean that area where that, dip is like 3.1 to about 4.5, there's a cut
Yeah.
of, depending on what ear pad you have, of about, I don't know, 4 to 7 dB, somewhere in there, depending on what ear pad it is. But yeah, it definitely is an area where, it's between that, depending on how you're defining it, between the, upper mids, lower treble area.
Yeah.
And it's where a lot of voices start to sound sharp, so that, I don't know, you don't always feel like it has to be there or not, but you can definitely tune it up or down a little bit with the ear pads. And the closer your ear gets to the actual driver, it goes away a little bit, so that if you're using the Verite pads and Suede or something, I think it's pretty, it's down to around maybe 4 dB or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you're saying that's for the vocal presence to not be as forward and fatiguing, that it could occasionally be. Is that?
Yeah, I mean it adds it adds a little bit of smoothness to that area. It
Yeah.
actually also, because of that cut in that area, it makes the dimensionality and seem a little more layered.
Right, that was
if
the other
all
thing I
the
was gonna mention.
frequencies were there, I don't think the headphone would sound quite as three-dimensional. And yeah, I mean, you can definitely EQ it back in a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's all to your personal taste for sure. As
For
well.
sure, yeah. I always find that when I do that, I end up going back to with before EQ. So, but yeah, so I wanted to ask then about the pad development. So there seems like there's just so many different types of pads out there. I think last time you and I were talking about this, you'd mentioned that your favorite was actually still the Verite pads, or has that changed at all? Sorry, the
Which one did I
flat.
say last time? I said
I think it was the
Verite last
flat.
time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all over the place with the ear pads, because a lot of the time I'm listening to new headphones and testing them before they go out, or listening to my personal set sometimes, and it really depends on what amp I'm listening to and
Right.
what mood I'm in, or music. And it usually goes between the Verite pads and the Universe pads. I mean, the pads you get with your headphone are usually the pads Zach likes, to talk about myself in the third person, which is selfish of me or whatever. But I usually try to give a slightly warmer option and a more neutral option. The BE2 pads are great though, and they are a great middle ground. And I think I was reading that you prefer the BE2 pads these days?
Well, the BE2 Suedes are the ones that I'm into right now. Mostly for the treble balance. I really like the way the treble balance is. They're on here right now. But I think when I first got the Verite, I was more into the flat Verite pads. And I think it goes to what you were saying about how it almost feels like it's just closer to your ear as well. And so some of the technical aspects come through a little bit more strongly with the flat pads. And so I still often find myself going back and forth between the flat Verite pads and the BE2 Suedes. But actually, I wanted to ask, Bevan, do you have a different preference for pads than Zach does, or
Zach. I think
maybe
I
with the
like
Verite closed, let's say?
the Verite closed. I like generally a warmer presentation. I probably like the Universe pads. I think they're on the Verite closed.
A little more of a downslope there for
A
you.
little more of a downslope. Yeah.
Yeah, the more people lately have liked the Verite pads on the Verite closed. People who want that more neutral presentation, which is surprising because most people want the closed headphone to have all that punchiness and stuff that closed headphones are known for. But the Verite pads have been picking up steam a little bit on the Verite closed. I'll let you listen to them later.
Yeah, give me a trial, a demo.
So when you guys are developing pads, I mean, is one of the reasons for that just because that's what you're like, I wonder how this is going to sound with this headphone, and then you come up with a design, or how does that work, or what's the inspiration for the different pad development?
I think there's a little bit of an explanation on our website, which I need to make easier to find on the website. That's called under the information section, it's ZMF pads, and then there's some rules on there. But generally, the idea is just that once you find the right ear pad volume for a headphone, you can kind of play around with it to where, as you move the ear closer to the driver, you can make the inner cavity wider, because you're getting closer to the driver and taking away some of that volume. And as you get further away from the driver, you have to close down the space a little bit to keep the volume the same. And so that's kind of the Universe Pad, BE2 pad, and Verite pad all have very, very close, almost exact ear volume sides, even though they change the distance the ear is from the driver. And you kind of know as the ear gets closer to the driver that you're going to smooth out the frequency response a little, where you're going to get a little bit less of that, reverberance around in the ear side cavity. So there's going to be a little bit less bass. The treble's going to be a little bit smoother. You're going to get rid of, any, like in the Verite, any peaks and valleys are going to get compressed a little bit. And as you move the ear further away, the opposite effect is going to happen. And so, having those options for each headphone, it helps users find what works for them, because us as humans all react to the same thing differently. I was actually talking to people the other day about how humans just are so varied in how we react to everything, that having that stuff helps people enjoy each part of the thing, because that's the thing about everybody, is that everybody's tastes and everybody's going to hear things a different way. Some people taste cilantro as like soap, and some people like guacamole. You're a cilantro soap person,
yeah.
right?
Disgusting. Sorry.
I used to be a cilantro person, but I'm not anymore, so taste can change.
That's true. That's very
What
true.
what happened to you?
I got really bad food poisoning once after eating something that had cilantro in it, and now it's like the sauce bernaise syndrome or something like that. Where every time I like have cilantro, I'm reminded of that that experience.
Yeah. Have you found a new food that you enjoy to replace it?
No, unfortunately, and I'm really upset about it, because there's so many awesome foods out there that I like that have cilantro in them that I just can't enjoy anymore. Just a real bummer.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Life is hard. I have to live without cilantro for a little bit. But actually, one of the things that I really like about, the pad differences, they are different enough where, at least the ones that I've tried so far, I haven't tried all of them, but it's something where it's another part of that personalization aspect that I really like, where, instead of doing, a lot of my audience, for example, is really resistant to the notion of doing EQ, right? And the cool thing about all the different ZMF pads is that you don't have to, right? Like you can use a different pad, right? It's a slightly different type of sound. And that was one of the things that, like, I remember even when I first got the Verite, I was so surprised at how different it was with the Verite pads and the Universe pads, where I thought to myself, this is almost like you have two different headphones. But yeah, that's just something that is, I think, super unique to ZMF.
Yeah, and I've always found using ear pads for me, is a better way of tuning a response of a headphone than adding or taking away filters over the driver. And that's not to say that adding or taking away filters over the driver is a bad thing or anything, but you are changing the airflow and how fast the sound's getting to your ear, because you're changing the how much air can come from the driver and how much air can be moved. And so you may get a similar response in flattening the treble peaks from putting some acoustics or something over the front of the driver. But once you find that good zone of how you want the driver to impart air to the ear pads allow that speed of air movement from the driver to remain more constant with ear pad change.
Yeah. I always think it's amazing how much of a difference that like earpads in general can make. But you're talking about filters like the way like some of the Dan Clark Audio, like the Aeon headphones, they have kind of like a tuning filter that you can like inserts that you can put into it. I'm not sure if that's, or do you mean like actually in front of the driver?
Yeah, I mean like anything in front of the driver, you know, and a lot of that comes from my T50 days, and where a lot of our T50 mods had frontal damping in front of the driver.
Right.
It's just something that I found, and you know, even you know, I had this experience with the Verite at RMAF, where we really wanted to show the Verite at RMAF, and you know, we had a version with you know, an acoustics filter on it and a version without.
Right.
And my ears were so, you know, fatigued from just tuning this headphone so long that what ended up happening was I didn't realize it, but putting that filter in front was slowing down the airspeed so much that it lost some of that dynamic edge that was really enjoy about it, but it made me able to listen to it more because my ears were tired.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah.
so it's just, I find that, you know, what I've realized is that, you know, once you take slow that airspeed down at all, you know, it kind of, once we took that off at RMAF, people were like, oh, that's, you know, that's what I wanted to hear.
I remember that.
I don't know how the Dan Clark headphones work as far as those filters work, but it's mostly what I'm talking about is just my experience with, you know, our headphones and my T50 modding days, and then having that experience at RMAF.
Right. Yeah, I remember because I think I was following the Verite's development fairly closely because I knew I already was a ZMF fan before then. So I remember I was like, oh yeah, what are people saying about this? And I remember that you know, the different impressions that people were getting, and like one was from the one that had the whatever it was that you put in front, and the other one didn't. And so I remember, yeah, there was definitely almost like a bit of controversy back then, but. Actually,
I see somebody saying on the thread here that the BOP mesh is an interesting choice. It is actually something worth going through. It's just we used to use acoustics paper, and the acoustics paper is great, but it's a plastic poly kind of paper, and you know, in that, putting it on a headphone, you basically have to adhere it, you know, to the grill. And we found that the acoustics, even though it's made of steel, and they actually came and gave us a full tour of how they produce the material and everything, because it's more sturdy and made of steel and has rounded edges, and they have this special machine that makes it to keep everything acoustically transparent to the level that you want it. They have steel papers that go all the way from, you know, a 20 to a 360, I think. And so you're able to try all these different filters to change the airspeed. And so we ended up trying all of them, and you can really figure out how much airspeed you want from the driver based on which, you know, BOP filter you're using. And then once that steel filter's on there, even though because it's steel, yes, it can dent and everything, but you're not gonna, you know, it's not gonna alter the performance or anything if it ever gets dented or touched or anything. It's just a much more long-lasting frontal driver filter that we like to use now because, you know, it has that, you know, better production quality to it.
They gave us one of these, you know, when you pick a paint sample and you have like a fan of all these different shades that go from like the lightest to the darkest. They gave us one of those, all these BOP filters that are going to change the sound in some regard for Zach to sample. So
did they indicate how much they were going to change them, or is that something you just had to experiment with? Oh, they did. Okay.
Yeah, you have you can get them in, you know, just about any thickness or thinness or how much, you know, pores you're looking through, and you look through them with this you know, almost interesting kind of jeweler's magnifying glass that you can look so close in to see how the mesh is woven.
Cool.
The other thing I like about it too is just that by having that in front of the driver, it, you know, at least on the A-list, you know, believe it or not, we get, you know, stuff people, I don't know, take pads off, and then I'll put the thing down on the table, and lo and behold, they, you know, cut a magnet open there an hour ago, and it keeps stuff like that from going in and, you know, getting stuck to the driver magnet.
Right. So this pretty much exhausts all the questions that I had for you guys. But I figure now is probably a good opportunity to turn it over to the chat. So unless there's anything, unless Tyler, do you have anything for Zach at the moment?
Tyler.
Not really, nothing too crazy. How was your coffee this morning? What was the special brew this morning?
Oh, I haven't had coffee yet today. I drank a smoothie, but Bevan had this really fruity Columbia light roast, and did you like it?
It was a little. I prefer a more like caramelly.
You want a more robust.
Yeah, dark.
I'm sorry.
Earthy coffee. So it was not totally in my wheelhouse, but it was a nice experiment.
Fair enough.
How was your coffee this morning?
It was quite delicious. I've been doing a new brown sugar musca. Honestly, one of those real fancy brown sugars I've been using for my sweetener. So it's pretty good.
Oh, you use sugar?
Usually honey. Usually I'm a honey guy.
I thought you were I thought you were sweet enough.
Shame, Tyler. Shame.
No, I'm just kidding.
Shame.
See, the original name for this channel was actually going to be Headphones and Coffee, but then just because, well, coffee's amazing, but that name was already taken, unfortunately. So.
Actually, there's another one I've been having that my wife got me. It's really interesting. It's this lady in LA, and she makes these like to go coffee things, and she does this one that's like a Vietnamese coffee. Have you ever had? You guys had Vietnamese coffee before, right? It's delicious.
Yeah, with the condensed milk.
Condensed milk, and it's like a little espresso shot, and then you ice if you want. But anyway, so she does like a prepackaged deal where it's like you comes and it has packaged in it, and you pull it out, and it has this little filter that you rip off and pull on, and it sits on the things. I've been doing those. It's a pretty cool little company. It's like something cow, like Golden Cow. I don't know.
Oh, it's I think they were on The Pitch, on the podcast The Pitch. It's called
I think you're right. Now. Yes, yeah. But my wife bought me a whole pack of those, and I was like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah, I was actually. I mean, they're not as good as like if you were to get it super fresh, but like it's for like a prepackaged like deal. I was
for something you can put it in your lunchbox and bring it. Yeah,
exactly. Pretty interesting. Sorry, I'm getting away.
No, it's good. Yeah, we got lots of questions now. So the first one I see here actually is going to be from Antdroid. He says, Zach, have you ever heard of Dexmet or AstroSeal? They make expanded metal meshes.
They're what? I have not heard of them, but they're other metal meshes.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Antdroid is, I think, a materials engineer.
He
doesn't he work with adhesives?
Adhesives.
Yeah, he does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Stalking you, Android.
Yeah, I mean, always willing to
could have a collaboration.
Do a better job of the same thing. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. We were just talking about adhesives. That with Android.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love learning about new materials and stuff, and our engineers always, posing stuff, and sometimes our machinists will tell me how I need to do something, and like, you know, you guys are smarter than me in this, non-acoustic stuff, so definitely tell me how to put this stuff together.
Okay, so let's see. So I guess, go ahead, Tyler. You got one?
There's a couple that I pulled from the beginning of the chat just to kind of nail it real quick. Elnrick asked, does developing and tuning a new headphone ever just mess with your brain and alter your preferences along the way? That was from Elnrick. Question. The taffy.
Yeah. Taffy. I was just enjoying some taffy. Vanilla taffy. Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar. We used to have this saying in film school that films are never finished but just abandoned. And I mean, anything that is art or craft or whatever you want to call it, there's a certain point where you get exhausted from just that being the only process. And I think we're, with all of us being united, we're in the United States. Andrew, you're in Canada, right?
Yep.
Andrew.
Yeah. Resolve. Should I call him Resolve or should I call him?
No. Andrew's fine.
All right. Well,
yeah, I'm in Canada.
See you over here. I don't see you there. But anyways,
you guys should come visit. It's COVID free up here, so at least in BC.
Oh, I love it. We might expat.
Yeah.
Just,
so we can have ZMF North.
Yeah, we're looking at New Zealand ourselves.
New Zealand seems great, but anything you do for it, like including self quarantine, you get a exhaustion from it. And so there's been times where and I think I was talking about RMAF earlier. I had been listening to the same thing so much that I lost perspective. And that's why I tell people sometimes there's breaks in R&D development, because you need a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to come back to something to try to have fresh ears on it again. And during that process, I mean, I don't know if it's age or just being through all these experiences where you're going back and forth between a measurement rig and subjective impressions, that you do gain, new insights. But I think some of it's environmental. I know some people, if they're at different altitudes, they want to listen to things that are brighter or not as bright. And I think we're all, as humans, constantly changing in that aspect.
I've noticed. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Too, once you get in that area where you spent so much time with a headphone, that I feel like you're getting a little out there in the fringe, that's the exact point where you need to get other people's ears.
Right.
You need to reach out to ears that you trust, people who sort of know your house sound. And they can either confirm, I totally understand what you're trying to do here, you're headed in the right direction, I might suggest this or this, but yes, once Zach gets in that area where he's spent too much time with something, then it's the exact time when you pass it on and get outside perspective.
And go to a couple concerts.
Yeah.
Sorry, Zach. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. Sit right next to the speakers.
Hearing protection at concerts. I'm very
smart.
Very anal retentive about my hearing protection. I got some of those Etymotic.
That's what I have. I keep them in my EDC. Yeah, the little keychain thing. Those are awesome.
I was gonna say, as a reviewer, it definitely changes from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. So if you're constantly listening to headphones all day, you do not, and also it's not good for you. You have to make sure it's at a fairly modest volume.
Yeah, I'm
exactly.
a lot of people I know listen to headphones for hours at a time, and I'm a very hey, I'm gonna listen to 1 or 3 songs, or for 10 to 15. And it's probably part of my just psyche and my always moving around doing different things, but I've never been able to sit down and listen for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time.
Well, and you also, I noticed this about myself. I think after a certain point, you're not able to pay attention as closely, because you're so used to it now.
It's like binge watching Netflix. You get to episode 17 of Intervention.
2 to 3 times the speed.
Eventually, So okay, we got Eudes Tavares. I don't know if this is the Eudes from Discord, but it says, Zach, are you gonna show me how to build guitars? Or I guess this is, when are you gonna show me how to build guitars?
Hey, I want to show myself how to build guitars again. I can't. The last time I made one was probably 10, 12 years ago, because there was a period where I was building them all the time when I was 22 to 25 years old. I moved to Chicago, no room to build guitars. I started building headphones, so I've got a guitar wood and all this stuff ready to go as soon as we get in our new space. Have a little. Can I build a guitar when we move to new space?
Headphones and guitars.
You could have it be ZMF, ZMF guitar. It's funny.
Come on by. We'll build I only build acoustic guitars though.
My uncle's actually that's what he does for a living. He's a professional. He's a luthier. Yeah. So my dad is too, but not as good. So but they would always go down to the luthiers conferences and stuff like that. The stories I always heard was when they go down there to those conferences, I say down there because we're in Canada. Everybody, because my dad's a guitar player, he's a classical and flamenco guitar player, and everybody would find out that he's a guitar player, and they would all ask him to be like, "Here, I built this. Can you try it? Can you play it?" Right? So everybody wanted him to try out their craft, right? What they were proud of.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Was he nice about it, or was he like, "This one"? Yeah,
no,
so good.
That's a good question, actually. I don't know. I should ask him. But actually, I think for the most part, they're the people who are really good at their guitar building craft. It ends up sounding pretty good for the most part. But I don't know enough about that world,
It's similar to headphones. All the hobbies and professional applications have,
Yeah.
a wide variance of really cool stuff that a lot of people are making and doing a nice job of.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we could. We got some more questions here. How should? Okay, this is something I think everybody's been curious about. How should you decide between an open or closed Verite? Obviously, assuming that you don't require it to be a closed back headphone. Like, if you were to choose between the open and closed, what would be the difference?
If we were to choose, like, which one would I choose?
Like, how would you give someone advice?
Oh, give someone
Yeah,
advice?
yeah.
Well, the main sonic difference, if we're just talking sonics at first, is that, in the closed tuning of the Verite closed, it's got a little bit more mid-bass punch, and maybe a touch more of that kind of, rumble to it. And also the upper mids in that, like, 1 to 2K area, there's a little bit of a bump and a little more bite in the upper mids to the closed version. Aside from that, they're pretty close sonically. I was talking to somebody the other day that the mids are actually, I purposely changed the airflow around the driver and that area to get a little bit less of a complete flat line into the mid range, so that there's, a little bit of that down slope
Yep.
between the 150 hertz to 300 area, because I just found that in closed headphones,
Yep.
if you keep that, kind of in a straight line slope, everything ends up sounding a little woofy, and I think that's because you're not losing, any airflow out of the back, so you have this kind of pressure buildup. And so, you have to take away a little bit of energy in certain areas to have things sound natural, at least to me. As far as, which one they should choose, I as you said, I wouldn't do it in a genre-based fashion. I would do it based on use case and, whether they like that little bit more bite in the, the upper mid-range area, mostly what I'd say, because they do sound quite close to each other.
It's funny you mentioned that the slightly more like contoured bass to mid-range transition thing, and this is something that Kryn and I have been debating for a long time now, whether or not it's appropriate to have the dip there.
Well, it's different for closed versus open headphones.
That's what I'm thinking as well. Yeah.
Is that I actually had it almost directly matching the open version of the Verite, and I've noticed this in other builds too. It's actually there in the Atticus, and a lot of times people say, do I want the Icon or Ori pads in the Atticus? Because if you put the Icon pads in the Atticus, it's very downsloped and that area is filled in. But to me, when you put it in there, because it's downsloped and fills in that area, you get this kind of like almost, I don't know how to describe it, almost like fleshy sound in that area, especially with like male vocalists, where they sound, their voice all of a sudden it sounds like it's got too much, like their mouth is too close to the mic.
Yeah.
And so the Ori pads, because they have less foam to them and a little bit different shape to them, end up adding in that contour a little bit. And it's definitely a personal thing. And using the Verite pads actually on the Verite close gets rid of it mostly, for people who do want more of that flat response. But it's also a taste thing. So, I don't know if there's a right or wrong in that area either. I'm sure once you go too far with the dip, it can sound natural.
I have to add fleshy to my, vocabulary for, audiophile terms.
Maybe breathy.
Sounds liquid and fleshy. I got a question here for you guys.
Sound.
Yeah. I think I was talking about one before. It was a little bit, if something's a bit too thick in that range, it sounds soupy, as if you're like or like swampy. Yeah.
The soup a little chunky for my taste.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody asks, what is your favorite solid state amp for the Verite closed? I guess for either of you guys, for Zach or Bevan.
Do you have one?
The Ravenswood maybe?
Yeah, that's the one. The one that's on our desk right now. There's two ones that I go back and forth between the most are the Sparkos Labs, which is not a very well-known headphone amp. Actually, I don't know the exact name of the amp, but it's their only solid state. It's made by this place called Sparkos Labs that we met them out in Colorado. And he did a really extravagant job with the volume dial attenuation to make sure that
Right.
the left right channels were, completely matched, and you can hear all the steps that he built in there on the attenuator. And that one's it actually sounds quite similar to the Ravenswood in that it's a really clean, punchy sound. But the Ravenswood for music listening, by ECP, ECP Audio is probably the one that I go to the most for solid state. It just has in it, and part of the reason is because, especially with the Amorphous Transformer, which is the slightly brighter sounding one, it has this layering to it that I don't know if it's a slight distortion being added in somewhere or what, but it has a layering to it that a lot of solid state amps don't always have. So I really like that aspect while sounding really clean and having a really black background.
This makes me think of there was one of those amps from Lake People at CanJam that everybody's raving about, the Nimbus line. I don't know if you guys got a chance to try that one out.
I don't think I've heard it, no.
Yeah,
heard
but I think
Water-
it's that's it's
It
part of the
is.
branding. It's called Nimbus 2000.
The DCS Bartok has
Oh,
some
yeah,
of those qualities too, and that's a I know it's more than $10,000, but it's one of the other solid state amps that you hear it and you're like, wow, this has some kind of magic happening.
Different kind of magic from the Nimbus.
I haven't heard the Nimbus,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
maybe yeah.
No, it's just I was speaking with Fried Rhyme from Lake People. He was telling me his description sounded a lot like what you just described with the I can't remember the other one that you just described. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Metal571, the YouTube sensation, asks, can you measure the difference between the woods on the ZMF model in some way on your measurement systems?
So what was it? Describe the woods.
No,
Okay, can you? Okay.
You measure the difference in woods. We don't tune any headphone differently based on the woods. I did do a test where I put the same driver from I think it was a Teak Auteur, and took that exact same driver to make sure that there were no variables that were different in the same baffle. Put that into a Blackwood Auteur, and there was a 0.5 to 1 dB in the 40 hertz on down area in the Blackwood set that was repeatedly on my AP system a little bit extra. But the thing is to say that 0.5 to 1 dB that I was able to repeat in the Blackwood cup versus the Teak cup, is how perceptible that is to a user. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, the thing I hear more in the difference between woods is how much decay there is, how much cup reverb there is, how much the sound, the kind of lingering. I mean, one thing that's kind of interesting about the lighter woods is sometimes the transient, even though the wood is less dense, will seem a little faster because you're getting, a little bit less damping from the cup, so you actually almost hear the front edge of the note a little. So when I say faster, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sound faster to the user.
Right. You guys still there? I think I lost you there for a second.
Yeah.
We are here.
Oh,
Are you
okay.
there?
Yeah. No. Yeah. We're all
Are
good.
you
All
here?
good. Tyler, did you have any others there that you pulled out?
There was a couple, but it looks like you kind of already nailed a lot of the questions, just naturally. So yeah, I'm not seeing too many.
I got lots here, so we could we could go for hours. Not saying we will.
I have a fun one.
Sure.
For both of you, this is a more fun to kind of take a break from the technical a little bit. But if you guys could be a tree, which tree would you be?
Be a tree. Which tree would I
Or
be?
even if you could be a type of wood that would then get used in headphones, which type of wood would you be?
I know. I'm trying. I wish I knew more about the life of trees beyond what they look like when they're made into headphones. I mean, I always love the way camphor wood smells, but I don't know what it's like to be a camphor wood tree. There's something about those trees that grow for thousands of years that, us being human and being mortal and all that. There is something about like desert ironwood that, it's in this grown and dried, desert-like locations, and it grows for thousands of years possibly to get to its, mature
Right.
size. And, I don't know, there's something about something being able to exist that long that I think, to me as a mortal human sounds romantic and, crazy that these trees that live that long can outlast all these things that happen in human generations. But I don't know what if that would be a good experience as a tree. You have a tree?
I don't know. I really like the look of the olive wood that Zach was talking about, that we have one completed headphone in. It's like a really kind of sandy blonde with very straight, like dark etched lines through it.
Would you want to be an olive wood tree though?
I don't know. No, if I was going to be a tree, I was thinking at first like an apple tree, but then
This
I
is the best
remembered that
question.
scene in Wizard of Oz where they're very angry and they're throwing apples, and that suddenly lost its appeal. But maybe like a big oak tree in someone's backyard that has like a tire swing attached to it and like a little tree house. Like the
That's my
Given tree.
middle name, actually. You know that? Fun
Treehouse?
fact for the day. No, Oak.
I thought that was your last name.
Tyler Treehouse.
Yeah, that would be pretty epic, actually. But
I think I saw that. Is that on your Instagram name?
yeah,
The oak.
yeah, yep. Yeah, so
I
that's
know
my
it's part of-
my family. Our family has a lot. It's either in our initials or in our name somewhere. All the boys in our family have a
Cool.
tree somewhat in there. So, like my brother's initials are Elm, my nephew's is Elm, my dad's was Elm. I just got Oak.
Can't use elm again.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, one of the other questions here is any limited edition woods on the horizon?
Ooh.
It's a couple. Yeah, I mean, part of the joy of making the headphones for me is trying new woods out in this, and I have my wood stash is. I buy too much wood all the time, but the
Hoarder.
ones coming up are Cocobolo for the Aeolus. We're doing the Verite closed in the same camphor wood that we're doing the Verite open in right now.
Camphor Burl.
The Auteur, we just are starting. I just bought a stash of Wenge that I'm going to cut into the Auteur. Because we made a couple Auteurs early on in Wenge wood, but they were just prototypes. We never did a run of it. So I found a really nice with the Osmo finish we use. The Wenge just turns out absolutely beautiful. So we're going to do the Auteur in that. The stabilized woods we're getting to. I think we showed Tyler a couple of the cups last week. So we're trying to get a little bit more caught up, and those aren't going to be sold in the normal fashion as the limited editions are usually sold. They're going to be sold as pictured on the website. So as we finish the headphone, they'll be built to spec, just meaning they're not built for any specific person.
Right.
And they'll each be put on the website so each person can see exactly what they're buying. And the upcharge on those is going to be about $200 to $300 per headphone, depending on the cost of the wood. So,
And
like
that's
a Verite limited.
because they're very specific in their look too, right? Like they have each has a
Yeah.
unique, yeah.
Yeah, they all have, because that's the thing is we realized that if each person had a specific thing in mind of what they wanted with the
Right.
stabilized wood, we may not be able to meet it. And, it's better that they know exactly what they're getting, which you can't, with stabilized wood, it's much harder to do because there's, epoxy fills and stuff like that in it.
Right.
Dibs.
So it's got to be purple.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe.
I see.
See, now I'm gonna be looking at the website because I'm curious about this.
Yeah, we'll probably get there in July or something like that. We're moving there as fast as we can, but we want to make sure we're, caught up enough from, getting over our, slight
Right.
fall behind the pandemic and everything. And fortunately, we're back to, making headphones at a good pace now.
Right. I got a question here from Head Karma. What is Zach's favorite tube roll for the Verite closed on the Glen OTL? I think I know the answer to this, but I'll let you go ahead.
I mean, there's so many tubes you can roll in that thing. It's hard to label it down to one. But I usually have been going back and forth between these Tungsol 5998s on the driver tubes and the Chatham 6AS7Gs. I also have a pair. I know you said favorite, but I'm going to name more than one, I guess. A pair of Amperex 6080s that I like a lot, which I think they might be Mullard 6080s, but they're labeled Amperex. So those are the driver tubes I like. On the input side, I really like this 6F8G. I think the labeling of it when converted to 6SN7. I like those. And then for whatever reason, I think it's because it changes the input of the input power a little bit. But there's the Brimar, however you say it, the 25 SN7 Brimar tube is really quiet and really nice in that amp. And then on the rectifier side, I'm usually using one of those Sittard GZ34s, Sittard Factory, either metal bass or non-metal bass, but those have kind of a cool yet still a little bit of euphony to them. And so with all those tubes, I end up getting a sound that's not too euphonic, not too tubey, but still has that tube dimension to it.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're tube rolling or like trying to settle on a sound that you like for tubes, do you just rely on switching out the tubes in that amp that you have there, or do you have like the same tube amplifier with like just multiple versions of it with different tubes in them, so you can more quickly go back and forth between them?
Oh, like, am I, like, is it more defined to the tube or more defined to the amp? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just thinking because every time I've tried to tube roll on any tube amplifier, you gotta like wait for the tubes to cool down, and then you gotta wait for them to warm up, and so like just trying to like settle on it. I mean, it takes a long time to do it, right? Just in general.
Yeah.
But that's what I was just wondering, like, if there's a process that sort of makes it easier for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, with the Pendant, it's a little easier because I have some of them in stock. I can get two of
Right.
them side by side, But usually, you'll turn it off. You have to wait. I usually wait 2 to 3 minutes until I can touch it, and then
Just
I'll
grab it
use
right away. I gotta get the sound right.
a glove, yeah. Oh, I gotta keep that sound in my head. But yeah, I mean, it's that whole process of taking stuff in and out, and then once you the thing is, once you find a tube that's quiet and has a good tone to it, and again, it's kind of like anything else in audio, the differences aren't always night and day unless you have a really bad tube that's just
Right.
noisy anyways.
Right.
Sheldon.
Is there a
So-
question?
Oh no, I
just
just
jump in.
Sheldon,
Sheldon
Oh.
has entered the chat.
Okay.
Sheldon.
Uh,
Start naming everybody I see. out
yeah,
here.
exactly, yeah,
Marcelo,
Oh, Lubo, I saw
Marcelo.
Monster.
Lubo.
You got a good group in here.
I know
Yeah.
it's like so sad that this is very nice in lieu of Can Jam to be like, oh hi, like
Well, that's it's really unfortunate that because in New York when I met you guys for the first time, that was the first Can Jam that I'd ever been to, and I was so like blown away with that whole experience that I was like, oh man, I can't wait to go to the next one. And then this whole thing happened. I think I was gonna go to there was one in Chicago, I think, or Axpona maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then of course just all this stuff happened, and so yeah,
I hope
hopefully.
you enjoyed yourself, because
Yeah, exactly right. All in one go and never again,
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Let's do a few more questions and then we can probably wrap it up here. But I think someone is asking if there's going to be anytime there's going to be a ZMF Verite in Blackwood.
Maybe. There will be. Yeah, there will.
Ah, here's a good one. Is the soundstage bigger on the Verite open or closed? I can't answer that.
Tyler?
So I was talking about that a little bit earlier. Like, so to me, they're so close, right? But I feel like, and it's funny because I think it was you, Zach, came with a 3D-ness factor, right? And I felt like the 3D-ness is is I think it's with the Verites. I think it to me it seems like there's more of that. Like there's more of like this presentation of depth and width than with the opens for whatever reason. So, but it's so close. Like you have to really have them back to back really to pick up on it. At least for me.
You're saying with the Verite closed, there's more.
Yeah, more depth. It feels like there's more depth and width to it. Like so that 3D factor of like it feels like I can pick out things in different spaces just a bit more with the closed, if that makes sense. And then the opens.
The closed, there's this accentuation of like space where it's accentuated because it's closed and you're getting that fast bounce back off the back of the cup, where the open has more depth for sure, but it doesn't quite have that like
that exactly. Yes. So yeah, that would be my answer too, is like the these feel like they have just more of that bubble around you is not better, but I perceive it better. Personally perceive it better. And then the Verite opens have that more traditional staging, I guess. But
I was going to say it probably depends on the pads as well.
Yeah,
definitely the pads will change it a little bit. Yeah. What do you have? Do you have the Auteur pads on there, Tyler?
I have the Auteur pads on. Yeah, the Auteur pads. And then I also have the hybrids. But the hybrids were a weird one for me. Like I felt like I'd lost some of the magic that I personally like when I had those on. So for me, but I mean they're really great. But like I felt like I really enjoy the Auteur pads. And then
it's one of those things where I like lambskin or protein, because it has that snappy, and I like that. And I think for someone like me who listens really intensely for like 20 minutes at a time, that's what I want. But I found that people who do longer sessions, or even who say they might have issues with tinnitus or anything like that, that the suede tends to help those people. Tends to help those people out because it smooths everything a little bit, lets them listen for a longer period without getting, fatigued. Yeah.
I'll be here for you. I got the assist.
Yeah. So that's why I use that the suedes right now. I have them on my all messed up here, but I have them on my cushy. I call them my cushy boys because I have the giant pilot pad on there with suede, and then I have the suede, and it's like putting a pillow on my head. It's so comfortable.
The giant cushy boys. I thought that was the prototype name for the new Grado hemp headphone. The cushy boys.
Well played.
We're saying we should just do their branding for them. Their pads are called Cushions, KUSH.
Oh, really?
No, but they should be.
Yeah.
And then I actually have someone was asking me about this the other day because they saw me with, because I did the Aeolus like impression review thing the other day, and someone was asking
I saw that.
that was more just like a fun thing to we were like kind of Dex was going to do one, and then he got called in for work, so like I'll jump on and do an impromptu review. But I actually have on my Verite let's see, my face in the way. Come on, catch up.
There you go.
The hybrids, the Verite pads. And then these are I really enjoy these. And
is it the Verite open?
Yeah, these are the opens.
Oh, cool. See, I didn't even know there were hybrid pads for the Verite open.
These are the B2s.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
And then, but the thing I want to show is here's what the actual suede pad looks like.
Suede strap, yeah.
Strap, sorry, not pad, strap. Yeah, because some people were like, "Oh,
that's the suede strap, but not the." But there's also the pilot pad, which is different.
Yeah, so that's the difference.
Right.
Here,
and now there's the co-pilot pad.
The co-pilot, right?
The co-pilot pad, yeah. So, you guys get an idea of.
Oh, cool! Wow, so this suede pad actually has quite a bit of padding there.
Yeah, it's a decent amount of padding, and then
that's really
so
interesting.
And then with the co-pilot's going to make that even easier to put on.
Yeah.
I just did it that way because it seemed natural to me. But
this one I'm using is the old Loeb strap here.
Oh yeah.
cool.
Fantastic. That's the stuff I love about
many-
you guys too. Is like all the cool like accessories and like the way you can like really bring it into your own personal preference, right? Like that's such a cool factor for your guys.
Yeah, and I also understand that all those options can make us as a brand more confusing in some stuff. And we had this experience the other day with a customer where they were they weren't gelling with the Auteur pads, but then we got them the Verite pads, and they like absolutely loved them that way on the Auteur or on the Verite clothes. So we're always working at trying to communicate what the options are to people a little better, because we realize that's all the pad options and all the comfort options make us more confusing. The good news is there's something that usually works for a greater audience because of that, but sometimes it can be need to communicate with us a little bit to get there.
Yeah, and I think honestly, your guys is I was talking to live chat for that Aeolus thing I did, and I was like, honest, I actually linked to your guys's the actual pad rolling guide in there. Like I specifically put that link to that specific pad rolling piece because I feel like that's pretty spot on. And if you guys don't know, you go to their website and you can go click the pad rolling, and then if you go down a little bit past the pads, there's a whole section of like your guys or Zach and your preference for the pads for the specific headphone too. Like I think you list the top 3 pads that you like on them. So
yeah, I probably need to update that because there's some new materials and such. But yeah,
that's a great starting spot. Like that's why I tell everyone like go there for like that's because you kind of nailed it on. Well, for me, you nailed it on the head. But I mean that's a lot of your descriptions and how you how you chose them. So that's how usually I tell people if they're like, well, which pad should I get? Well, go here and here's a good jump off point.
Yeah, we have Joe. Shout out Joe, who works for us, and he is a fantastic graphic designer as well as woodworker, builder, and he helped Zach. They developed that infographic that shows each headphone model and how the pads. I think Andrew was holding it up before, but
Oh yeah, this thing.
Yeah, I had
yeah,
it
just
too.
to try and sort ZMF
too far
out a
away.
little bit for folks because there are a lot of options, and we like to provide that flexibility. That you can sort of choose your own adventure and really make things like accustomed to your subjective taste, but that it absolutely helps to have a little bit of organization to the options. So we're going to do our part and our best to try and dial that in a bit, for sure. Also, hi, Sebastian. All right.
I had a question for Bevan actually.
Oh.
Well, for both of you guys, but I wanted to ask. I mean, I'm a little bit more familiar with sort of Zach's story with how he got into doing all this stuff, but I wanted to ask you, like, what do you find most rewarding about, like, I guess the whole headphone hobby, headphone building, and this whole world? Rewarding or interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I used to sort of discredit myself as having any anything that I could bring to the audio hobby because I was getting in so late. But my dad is actually a professional musician. He grew up, or he toured professionally across the world with Arlo Guthrie for like
Oh, wow.
all of my life, and I just sort of grew up around live music. There are pictures of me as like a toddler sitting in an open guitar case instead of a crib or a pack and play. Like I just was plopped into a guitar case, and so my life has been surrounded by live music, whether it's hearing my dad in a green room rehearsing, sitting middle balcony, sitting front row. Like I just have had a lot of experience with live music through that, and when I finally sort of figured out that I actually do have a pretty good ear, I think, because of that. And Zach will often ask me to listen to something, and I can give feedback. And I was kind of down on myself because I didn't feel like I was using the proper audiophile terms, and I wanted to, be in the hobby and sort of be able to interact in a way that the common nomenclature, the common jargon that everyone uses to show that they have some sort of know-how. But yeah, so I'm starting to learn my way, but I think that I do have a grasp on sound from that. before this, I was a social worker. I have a degree in child development and a degree in social work.
You were one of the first investors in CMF
I was one of the
too.
first investors,
Right,
but I would
the-
get home from work after counseling, you know, my students at the school, and I just always wanted to know what was going on with ZMF. And Zach and I, this might be an overshare, but like, we don't have children. We've got a beagle that we love very much, but ZMF has become like our thing.
Mhm.
Like it's something that we're raising together and we're growing together, and we're just so excited. You know, each time we come out with a new headphone, it's like, you know, little Meerbach. No, I mean, it's just really exciting. It's like something that you've worked on and produced together, and we're both like really invested and excited in making ZMF. It kind of feels like when you're a kid and you're just like playing make believe, and you're just so lost in what you're doing that you kind of like forget a sense of time and space. You're just really going on this thing. So that's what
Right.
ZMF has been like for me, and I how I sort of found my way into it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking of, you know, we were talking earlier about like having live music as like the reference point and hearing instruments and that kind of thing. So, you know, I bet it's useful to have that other opinion when you've been, you know, testing headphones for, you know, all day. Here, what does this sound like, right? And being able to have that reference point is probably pretty useful.
Yeah, I just have always been attached to music.
Yeah.
And so I think that translates, but I was sort of not sure that I had a place in it.
Well, all these audiophile terms and as you're saying, the nomenclature, I think it's a pretty big barrier to the point where I think it's worth trying to break those down a little bit, almost to try and simplify and make it a little bit easier, because I think if people care about music, right, at some point, you know, this stuff is going to be worthwhile. It's just a matter of, you know, making it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah. And there is kind of like a fun thing to elitism, you know, like within a hobby, you're like, oh, well,
Sure, yeah.
I know more than you do. Ha ha. Noob.
yeah, exactly.
I just
you
use
know.
food terms, so it works for me.
Yeah. Metal
I
says Metal
Freddie.
says Zach is the most wholesome person. Yeah, I tend to agree. It's
Also,
yeah.
Alex asked real quick, why the naming scheme? So why the Greek naming scheme?
I thought it was French.
yeah, I don't,
Naming products is one of the most difficult. Like, it is just. I want to say it's annoying, because you'll like be just racking your brains, like trying to figure something out, and then you Google it and something already has that name, or it like sounds too much like this other thing. So a lot of times these Greek names are names that we found, like Aeolus, for example, the divine keeper of the wind. I really liked that imagery of like someone who can harness power. You know, sometimes you come up with the imagery first and you search like, is there, you know, like it's almost tangential. Like you go down a rabbit hole of like type this in and it leads, you know, to all these places, or like, how do you say this word in a bunch of different languages? Do you want to?
yeah, no, it's, you know, finding something that suits the product you made and means something to you that you can put out into the world and feel good about saying that over and over and over. I mean, verite and auteur are both kind of film terms that, you know, I connected with through that part of my life. And, you know, the Greek names, like, you know, even the Mechanicos cable
Mm-hmm.
or electric cable. I mean, it's all about finding what the meaning of them is in their origin language and then translating it to how you think it will perceives the product you're putting out into. So, you know, the Divine Keeper of the Wind, you know, the Aeolus is kind of a bassy, nodal, punchy headphone, and the idea of, you know, this Greek god imparting, you know, this mid bass onto the masses.
We get like really weird with like personifying our headphones. Like how they all have different flavors. Like I remember when we were coming out with Atticus and Icon, we're like, oh, they're like these two brothers, and Atticus is kind of like the moody teenager who slams his, you know, his bedroom door.
Punches his door and
Yeah, and Icon's kind of like the more refined gentleman. So I think you know, we think about our headphones in lots of different ways because we're nerdy and all consumed, and it leads us to interesting spaces.
So the next one won't be called ZMF 11.
No, probably not. It might have the same name as what's the guy?
we were gonna call
Elon Musk's
I thought we were
child.
gonna call it the Bevan.
Oh my goodness.
The Bevan.
I really like Ohana, which in Hawaiian means like
Yes.
your
Family.
family.
Mhm.
But I don't know if that's too like if people will be like that makes me.
Umami. Someone mentioned umami in the live chat earlier.
That goes back to the food terms. See, I always thought that like the ZMF names, because they were so unique, they, not to make a play on words, but they all ended up becoming a little bit iconic with their you know, like
Like the icon.
yeah. But like, you know, even something like, you know, the newer ones like the Aeolus and the Verite and all this, I think like when maybe we first hear about, we being like the rest of the community first hears about these, then it, you know, it works its way into, you know, the you know, the mystique around it and everything, and then they become iconic as a result of this. So yeah, I always thought they were pretty cool. Let's see. Okay. What's that?
No, we try to find things that are interesting and that haven't been taken already.
Yeah.
Fair.
So okay, so if there's, I'm not seeing quite any other questions here, so I don't think there's anything we haven't already covered. So I will say, Tyler, do you have any final questions for Zach and Bevan, or if there's anything, because I do have a final question for you guys, so I'll let Tyler ask first.
You know, someone actually mentioned, we talked about it in our stream last weekend, but like someone mentioned, what's the hopes and plans for the next show you would like to do, kind of thing, or ZM Festivus 3. Wait, 3? Yeah, 3. Like, you know, we talked about it before, but that's.
I hope to leave the workshop at some point in the next 5 years. Yeah, I mean, the first step is, you know, it's hard not to bring what our world is going through right now into it, but, you know, just having a space where we can share together and, you know, share in this hobby and the things we enjoy, and be around other people more. Because, I mean, I know everybody is dealing with the pandemic in different ways, and depending on where your location is and depending on what your beliefs are. But you know, for us, you know, because we run business that does involve other people, you know, we're taking it very seriously, and you know, just to be able to have a ZMF Festivus anywhere would be amazing. But you know, at the same time, we have to do it in a way that doesn't endanger, you know, anybody.
Makes sense for the time and everything.
I think, yeah, we talked about with you, you know, it'd be great to have one in different locations at some point, because there's places where people, you know, want to hear ZMFs, but there's not a lot of coverage or shops that carry them. So, you know, coming out to, you know, the Vancouver area or the Seattle area is something we've talked about. And,
Right.
The ZMF Roadshow.
Oh.
The ZMF food truck.
Somebody was telling us we should get a little van and like drive around to different locations and do demos. If we didn't have to also make the headphones and run the company, that would be
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. You think you like the Verite, you're gonna like it when it's deep fried with ice cream.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty epic.
So, my last question for you guys is: somebody asked, "What's your favorite non-ZMF headphones?" But you guys covered that, I think, in the recent stream you guys did, where you talked about the HE60 and the HD800, and potentially L700. But I was wondering, is there anything like recently that you've heard where you've gone, "Oh wow, I'd love to do something like that," or "I'd love to do something with that," whether it's a technology or something?
You were pretty impressed by the head.
Yeah, I mean, the headphone, we were next to them at CanJam London last year, and they were just kind of in the middle of finishing up and tuning their headphones, and they showed me their whole process, what they do with the drivers and anything. And, you know, it's just, you know, using, you know, a membrane in that way. I know it's not a new technology, but I think it's new to get the weight and tactile feel they did from the drivers there. I thought that was a pretty neat thing that they've done. You know, with how they're doing their headphones. I have not heard the final version yet, so I don't know exactly how it sounds, but I think that's, you know, and it's just interesting, you know, how that headphone turned out. But that's probably the most recent thing I've heard that fascinated me and that I liked, and you know, all that kind of stuff.
We have a friend right now that's doing, I think, Bevan, I mentioned it to you, but we have he sent his headphone out to a quick tour amongst our different Discord guys, and he said that once it's through there, he'd be more than happy to send it your way for a demo too, if you wanted to. So that is...
Yeah, we're always happy to hear new stuff.
So I mean, like, is this something that could we see an AMT ZMF at some point in the future? Is that
yeah, I'd never you know,
never say never.
Cancel out anything. Yeah, I mean, never. I mean, you know, our what I like to do is just make headphones and make them with different technologies, and you know, always try to strive to make something new. So, you know, there's nothing imminent, you know.
Right.
But,
of course.
yeah.
I mean, that's pretty new tech for headphones in general. It's I think it's only really been done a handful of times. And...
I mean, it's in their speakers, right? So it's the headphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
ZMF X head.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You can get Exhibit to come in and mark.
X to the Z. Maybe he'll. Did he used to trick out people's cars? What was that show called?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, what
Pimp My
was
Ride?
that? Pimp My Ride, yeah.
Could have Pimp My Headphones.
Pimp My Headphones.
Ooh.
There you go. Yes.
It's just Zach shows up and starts modding them.
It'll be a contest on our Instagram.
It
Like
won't
and
be much
subscribe.
modding. It'll just mostly be just throwing diamonds.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sticky
from the outside.
diamonds on them.
Get some glue and just kind of
Yeah.
Bedazzle.
Yeah.
What's Salt Bay on the
Yeah.
Salt Bay?
Yeah. I love it.
Anyways, we've been going for a couple of hours now, so I think we should probably cut it there. Any final remarks from you guys? It's been a pleasure having you guys on. So yeah, just any final words from you guys if you guys want to talk about anything, by all means.
I appreciate having us on. I did want to give a shout out to the Lissamore brothers. You know, I always appreciate what they're doing for the headphone community with headphones.com and everything. And you know, whenever I think of them, I think of the familiar nature of you know, them running a business together. So
Right.
if my brother's listening, it could be the Merbach brothers. You come out here.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Two Murbocs and a Bevan.
I feel like I'm being ousted in some way, but
No, he'll join us. He won't be
Yeah, it's a two
replacing
Murbocs and a
anybody.
Bevan.
two men and a little lady. I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up in the chat. Like, it's really great to see familiar names, and thank you guys for having us on. It's like, this kind of stuff really does, you know, make us really excited and happy. It makes us really happy making headphones for people that they like, and just having this community is really, so thank you all.
Oh, you're very welcome, and we'd love to have you guys on again, and hopefully we can see you guys in person in the near future at an event of some kind, or yeah, like I said, come up to Canada, and, you know, we'll be happy to hang out and have a beer or something, and yeah, it'd be great.
To the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. yeah. Anyways, so we're gonna cut the stream there. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and as usual, we'll have this as a podcast in the description, and for all the rest of the links, they'll be in the description as well. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks once again to Zach and Bevan from ZMF for joining us. Alrighty, bye for now, and I'm